real pleasure to be living in this country. It really is. I have a real intimate, undying, abiding love for this country. And what you find interesting is that the people who come here legally from communist countries are more adept to understanding freedom than the people who are native born to this country now. It is stunning. You just ask people from Cuba. You ask people now that are leaving Venezuela how they feel about socialism, how they feel about communism. How do they feel about Chavez and what's happened since then? How do they feel about when Sean Penn came to visit to celebrate Chavez and his socialism, communism? And by the way, Chavez was elected. He was duly elected in Venezuela. Venezuela was prosperous, one of the most prosperous states. And yet he, as a socialist Democrat, was duly elected by a free people. Now that free people in 2012 was disarmed, and now they're being run over by tanks. I can tell you, when I was in Cuba, I was very young. I was a teenager, and I went to this place called the Cuban Village. And I went there to become a warrior, to learn how to fight, and also to play the Spanish guitar. So for a young boy, what a combination. It was pretty cool. But afterwards, after the lessons, I was privileged to go to where these guys went. They were old guys. I mean, some of them were in their late 40s and 50s. So, the stories. Now, this place was a cabana, and it had a roof, and it had mostly walls. There were plenty of walls, majority walls, but it was big, and it had great food, and it had music, dance floors, big bar, and everything. And all the Cubans came in and talked about Cuban life. The casinos, the partying, the rich, the famous, the young, and the restless coming in from all over the world to Cuba for decades. They were the mecca of Latin America. It's wonderful, beautiful, prosperous. They had a great nightlife. They had great environment for businesses. They had all these things, including the mafia. The mafias are smart. They don't go to Mongolia. They go where the money was, and the money was in Cuba. Cuba was a wonderful place, made some money. In 1957, they told me, 1957, Cuba was more prosperous that year than any time before, and of course, any time since. And so how did this person, this young, dynamic, articulate person coming down from Sierra Madres, how did he captivate not only the Cuban people, but the world? How did he do that? It was a prosperous country. He was dynamic, and he was not into details. He talked about hope and change. Didn't talk about how to change or change to what. But he did say he was going to take care of corruption. That was the number one thing. And the other thing is that the big thing was that he was against communism over and over and over again. He says, you know what? I can tell you truthfully, I'm against dictatorships. I hate dictatorships. 2, I hate hatred. I hate the class warfare. I like to keep Cubans together, not apart. That was a big thing. And the third thing was communism is against God and against the church. And certainly against, I love the church and God. These are fundamental, foundational principles, and he betrayed every single one. And the reason he was successful was because he lied. And the reason that the lies were successful was because he presented this to the American media, and the American media laundered his information, laundered the fact that he was surrounded by communist infiltrators and his own violent past, and they vouched for him. They gave him legitimacy. And because of that, both Fidel Castro and Raul Castro had said over and over again publicly that without the American press, they would not be able to go and win the revolution because they didn't do it by arms. There were no dozens of hundreds of people dead. They had maybe a couple of dozen people that died during the whole campaign. But they could not do it through military means. They had to do it by propaganda and by the money that came in from Florida from anti-Batista so that they can pay off the military over there. So I just want to tell you that I'm very glad to be here. And I bless all of you, and I hope that in the generations to come, they will enjoy the Republic as we do now. Thank you.